The familiar glow of blue and purple lights filled the late show with Stephen Colbert studio as the host leaned back in his chair after finishing his trademark monologue. The audience, still chuckling from his previous jokes, fell silent as Colbert's tone shifted from playful to thoughtful. "Tonight's show is going to be a little different," he began, adjusting his glasses. "Before I bring out our guest, I want to talk about something incredible that happened in Washington this week, something that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention." The screen behind him lit up with a photo of Representative Jasmine Crockett, whose name had been making headlines thanks to her bold work on a major education reform initiative. What happened next stunned everyone: the audience in the studio, viewers at home, and even Colbert's own crew. The host, known for his quick political humor, set aside the satire and spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "You know, my job is to point out the absurdities in our political system," he said, smiling slightly. "But tonight I want to celebrate the incredible efforts of Representative Jasmine Crockett. Her dedication to the educational opportunity act shows something that's rare in politics today, a genuine commitment to improving people's lives, not chasing political points." The emotion in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a setup for a punchline. It was a genuine acknowledgement of public service in an age dominated by spectacle. Before we dive deeper into this powerful story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We highlight real moments when leaders step beyond politics to serve the public good. To understand why this exchange between Stephen Colbert and Representative Crockett struck such a chord across America, it helps to know the authentic paths both of them took. Stephen Colbert, now 59, evolved from his days as a witty satirist on The Daily Show and The Colbert Report into one of late night's most respected voices. After years of playing as fictional conservative pundit, The Late Show gave audiences a chance to meet the real Colbert, a man of deep thought, faith, and empathy. Those close to him often described his genuine curiosity about social issues. Guests frequently mentioned how he would continue discussing serious topics off camera, showing a level of insight that went far beyond his comedy. One colleague once said, "Stephen's humor works because it comes from truly caring about our democracy and ordinary people." Over time, Colbert mastered the art of using humor to make complex issues understandable without oversimplifying them. And though his show carried a clear perspective, he wasn't afraid to praise integrity, even in people he disagreed with. Representative Jasmine Crockett's journey, meanwhile, could not have been more different. Before entering Congress, she spent years as an education attorney, fighting for families in underserved communities to secure equal access to quality schooling. Her shift into politics came when she realized that the problems she fought in court were systemic, requiring policy change, not just legal victories. Once elected, she quickly earned respect for her calm, data-driven approach. Rather than chasing headlines, she focused on crafting strong legislation grounded in evidence and collaboration. The educational opportunity act that caught Colbert's attention was the product of months of detailed work and coalition building. The bill called for expanding early education, improving struggling schools, investing in teachers, and closing the digital divide, ensuring that a child's zip code would no longer decide their future. Crockett's style stood out because it prioritized impact over ideology. She built partnerships with educators, families, and even skeptics, emphasizing research and fairness rather than political theater. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever seen a public figure rise above politics to recognize someone's real work? These moments remind us that most people, no matter their beliefs, want progress and fairness. Colbert's unexpected recognition came at a time when most media focused on conflict rather than solutions. Education policy rarely earns headlines unless it sparks controversy. Crockett's serious, fact-based work wasn't flashy, but it was effective. What no one predicted was how Colbert's heartfelt segment would magnify her message nationwide, inspiring discussions far beyond Washington and putting education reform back in the national spotlight. That night, the Late Show audience expected laughs. Instead, they witnessed one of the most genuine moments of integrity in late night Television history. The production team was caught off guard when, during their afternoon meeting, Colbert insisted on adding a new segment to highlight Representative Jasmine Crockett's education initiative. "This is more important than another celebrity story," he told them firmly. "Our viewers deserve to hear about this." When the show aired that evening, the large screen behind Colbert displayed powerful clips of Crockett visiting schools, meeting teachers and parents in underserved areas, and working with colleagues from both parties to gain support for her education bill. "What's truly remarkable about Representative Crockett," Colbert began, "isn't just the content of her education reform, it's the way she's chosen to pursue it. At a time when most politicians chase viral sound bites or quick headlines, she's focused on the hard work of actually fixing problems." He outlined several key parts of her legislation, including expanded access to early childhood education in both rural and urban communities, better teacher development programs, improved broadband access for remote learning, and innovation grants for schools testing new methods to overcome persistent challenges. At first, the audience wasn't sure where Colbert was heading with this unusually serious segment, but as he spoke, their curiosity turned into respect. This wasn't another joke about politics. It was a genuine acknowledgement of real public service. "What's especially impressive," Colbert continued, "is how Representative Crockett built support for this bill. She didn't start with partisan talking points. She began by identifying real problems, educational disparities, and their lasting impact, and then brought together teachers, parents, administrators, and experts from across the spectrum to find out what's actually working." The screen then showed a clip of Crockett speaking at a local forum. "Every child deserves the chance to reach their full potential," she said. "That's not a Democratic or Republican issue. It's an American principle that dates back to our nation's beginnings." The moment struck a chord because it contrasted sharply with the usual political coverage that focuses on conflict rather than cooperation. "Now, I know what you're thinking," Colbert said with a smile. "Stephen, where are the jokes about Congress?" "Don't worry, they're coming. But once in a while, we need to recognize when our public servants are truly serving the public." The crowd erupted into genuine applause, not the staged kind, but a heartfelt response to something real. Then Colbert added a personal note that deepened the moment. "As the son of educators and the father of children who've benefited from dedicated teachers, I know how life-changing quality education can be. Representative Crockett's work matters not because of her party, but because it fulfills a core promise we owe every generation, the chance to build a better future." What followed was unexpected, a series of testimonials from teachers, parents, and students directly impacted by Crockett's proposed legislation. A rural teacher explained how broadband expansion would let her students access advanced online courses for the first time. A parent from an urban area shared how early education programs would finally give working families access to resources once reserved for wealthier communities. A high school student talked about how career pathways could open doors his parents never had. These real stories transformed the segment from a simple discussion into something deeply human. Viewers began seeing education not as politics, but as a shared national investment in opportunity. Colbert had turned what could have been a short mention into a moving spotlight on how thoughtful policymaking can improve lives. "Representative Crockett isn't seeking fame," Colbert noted as the video ended. "She's not the loudest in Congress or the most quoted on TV, but her careful, cooperative work deserves recognition because it shows what leadership should look like." He then played a clip of Crockett calmly addressing concerns in a committee hearing, acknowledging valid questions, responding with evidence and building solutions instead of arguments. "See what's happening here?" Colbert said. "She's not attacking anyone. She's engaging honestly, focusing on facts and working toward progress." By the end of the segment, it was clear that Colbert wasn't just hosting a talk show. He was using his platform to highlight the kind of public service that actually improves lives. As the music played and the cameras faded, Colbert looked straight into the lens and left his audience with a thought that would soon go viral. Sometimes, Real leadership isn't about the spotlight. It's about doing the work that matters. We often talk about everything that's broken in our political system, and there's no shortage of things to criticize. But tonight I want to pause and recognize Representative Jasmine Crockett's work, because it reminds us of something truly important. Beyond all the noise and division, there are still public servants who quietly dedicate themselves to solving real problems for American families. Colbert ended his segment with a message that would echo far beyond his regular late-night audience. Her approach, he said, represents what we should expect from everyone in public service, not empty outrage or partisan loyalty, but a genuine drive to make life better through thoughtful, evidence-based solutions. The camera slowly zoomed out as the studio audience rose in spontaneous applause. The clapping wasn't just for Crockett's legislative work, it was also for Colbert's willingness to use his platform to celebrate meaningful public service. Instead of treating politics as just material for jokes, what neither Colbert nor Crockett realized in that moment was how this unplanned recognition would quickly amplify her education initiative beyond Washington, sparking a national ripple effect that would reach communities across the country. The next morning, Representative Crockett woke up to a flood of messages on her phone. Colleagues, staff members, constituents, and even her family were reaching out about her appearance on The Late Show even, though she hadn't actually been there. I was completely surprised, she later recalled with a laugh. I was reviewing committee notes at home when my mom called, asking when I'd been on Colbert. I didn't even know what she meant until I checked my phone and saw clips of the segment going viral everywhere. To her astonishment, Colbert's spotlight on her education initiative had gone far beyond the show's usual entertainment audience. Viewers across platforms were sharing it not as political commentary, but as a refreshing moment of attention to real policy work. Parent groups, teacher associations, and education nonprofits began reposting the video, praising it for highlighting an issue that rarely received thoughtful primetime coverage. In over a decade of working in education reform, I've never seen a late-night show devote this kind of depth to education policy, said the director of a national education organization. Colbert didn't just mention the bill, he explained why it matters. The attention quickly spread beyond social media. Local TV stations across the country began featuring stories about Crockett's legislation, interviewing teachers, parents, and students about the issues it addressed. What had once been a policy discussion inside Washington suddenly became a national conversation about educational opportunity and equity in America. Later that afternoon, Colbert's producers called Crockett's office, inviting her to appear on the show in person to discuss her work. At first, she hesitated. Late-night television wasn't exactly her usual platform. But after talking with education leaders and community partners who had helped shape the bill, she agreed. They all felt this was a once-in-a-generation chance to bring genuine attention to education policy. When Crockett finally appeared on The Late Show the following week, the tone of the interview was strikingly different from a typical talk show exchange. Instead of short, humorous back-and-forths, Colbert engaged her in a thoughtful conversation about educational inequities and practical reform. While keeping his signature wit, he gave her space to share real insights and data behind her work. What inspired you to focus so deeply on education when Congress is flooded with so many competing priorities? Colbert asked. Crockett smiled, then spoke with quiet conviction. I believe education is where all possibility begins, she explained. Before entering Congress, I worked as an attorney helping families navigate education barriers. I saw firsthand how a child's access or lack of access to learning can shape their entire future. A child who can't read proficiently by third grade is 4 times less likely to graduate high school. Those outcomes ripple through entire communities. But I've also seen incredible schools that succeed against the odds, teachers doing miracles with limited resources, and parents sacrificing everything to help their children learn. This legislation builds on those real successes, not on ideology. What viewers witnessed wasn't a politician delivering rehearsed lines, it was a public servant genuinely explaining how evidence-based policy could change lives. Colbert, instead of making jokes, listened, and asked deeper questions to help the audience understand the challenges and possibilities within America's education system. You've managed to gain bipartisan support, Colbert noted. How do you find common ground on an issue that often becomes politically divisive? Crockett answered thoughtfully. I start by listening. When a colleague raises concerns, I assume they're coming from a real place, even if I disagree. That opens the door to actual problem-solving instead of political posturing, she said. Then, with a light smile, she added, it also helps to come prepared with solid data. It's hard for anyone to hold on to ideology when the facts about what's happening in classrooms are right in front of them. Her calm, intelligent tone and sincere dedication left a lasting impression not only on Colbert's audience, but on millions watching online. What started as a single moment of late-night recognition had evolved into a national reminder that real leadership isn't about noise, it's about listening, learning, and working toward results that improve people's lives. The audience's reaction to this exchange was unlike the usual, routine applause of a talk show. Instead of clapping on cue, they listened closely, fully engaged, realizing they were witnessing something meaningful rather than merely entertaining. As the conversation deepened, Colbert shared something personal that made the moment even more powerful. My mother was a teacher and an administrator, he said softly. She always told me that education is about recognizing the potential in every child and creating the conditions for that potential to thrive. Watching your work on this legislation, I see that same commitment in action. Crockett nodded in agreement. That's exactly it, she said. Behind every funding line and policy detail, this is about one simple belief, that every child deserves the opportunity to grow into their full potential, no matter where they live or what circumstances they were born into. The exchange was real, heartfelt, and focused on how policy can change lives, a rare sight in today's political media environment. Rather than emphasizing conflict or personality, it highlighted how thoughtful governance could tackle real problems facing American communities. As their conversation came to a close, Colbert did something unusual for a late-night host. Representative Crockett, he said, I'd like to use our platform to help more Americans understand the educational challenges you're working to solve. Would you help us share stories from the communities that could benefit from these initiatives? That single invitation to bring real stories about education to a national audience would soon create an unprecedented wave of awareness across the country. Neither Colbert nor Crockett could have imagined how their collaboration would grow into a nationwide movement focused on education and opportunity. In the weeks that followed, something extraordinary began happening. What started as a brief, unscripted segment on a comedy show evolved into a full-fledged national conversation about educational access that crossed political boundaries. True to his word, Colbert launched a recurring segment titled Education Across America, showcasing the real-world impact of education policy on communities. Each week, he featured stories from across the country, rural towns where slow internet made online learning almost impossible, urban neighborhoods where teachers achieved outstanding results despite limited funding, and innovative programs connecting classrooms to career pathways. These weren't framed as political debates but as genuine human stories about struggle, hope, and perseverance. By linking Crockett's legislative work to the daily experiences of students, parents, and teachers, Colbert helped millions of viewers understand that policy isn't just paperwork, it's about people. It's about choices that shape the lives and futures of families in every community. The ripple effect went far beyond the Late Show's audience. Local TV stations and newspapers across the nation began running their own versions of education spotlight stories, exploring local challenges and successes. School board meetings that once drew a handful of attendees began filling up with parents eager to be part of the discussion. Education, usually overshadowed by political drama, had suddenly become a shared national topic. For Representative Crockett, the impact was transformative. Before Colbert featured our work, it was hard to get meetings with certain education partners, she later recalled. Afterward, people started reaching out on their own, educators, Administrators, even parents asking how they could contribute or share their stories. It changed the whole tone of the conversation from politics to solutions. Education organizations that had long struggled for visibility finally found themselves being heard. A coalition of rural education advocates credited the new attention for jump-starting broadband expansion programs they had championed for years. In major cities, reform groups noticed greater public understanding of how educational access connects directly to economic opportunity and community growth. 6 months later, The Late Show aired a special episode entirely devoted to education, filmed at a public high school that had implemented several of the reforms featured in Crockett's legislation. The audience included teachers, students, parents, and education advocates from all political backgrounds, united not by ideology, but by shared purpose. The episode gave the spotlight to those rarely heard on national television. Students describing how better learning opportunities had changed their lives. Teachers discussing both their challenges and triumphs, and parents sharing heartfelt stories about their hopes for their children's futures. What made this coverage truly powerful was how it avoided partisan framing altogether. Instead of simplifying complex issues into sound bites, it explored them through real experiences and collaborative solutions. The focus wasn't on political winners and losers. It was on how Americans could work together to create more opportunity for the next generation. Audiences responded deeply to this refreshing approach. A national poll conducted 8 months after Colbert's original segment showed remarkable results. 73% of Americans across party lines said they felt more interested in education policy discussions, and 68% said they had a clearer understanding of how policy decisions affected their own communities, schools, and students. It was proof that authentic storytelling, grounded in substance and empathy, could inspire people to re-engage with one of the nation's most vital issues. The promise of equal educational opportunity for every child. The impact on the Educational Opportunity Act itself was profound. Lawmakers who had once viewed it through a purely partisan lens began facing growing pressure from their constituents to look beyond party lines and focus on what the bill actually proposed. Many representatives who were initially skeptical eventually became co-sponsors after hearing directly from teachers, parents, and students in their districts. These families and educators spoke about how specific parts of the legislation could directly address the challenges their communities faced. What Colbert did by shining a light on Representative Crockett's work wasn't just good television, said one education policy analyst. It was genuine public service. He changed how Americans engage with a key policy area that affects every community but rarely gets meaningful attention. For Colbert himself, the experience was eye-opening. In a later interview about the education initiative, he reflected, "Comedy has always been my way of understanding the world, and I'll never stop using satire, but I've realized that those of us in media hold incredible power. We decide which stories get attention and how people understand them. Sometimes that means stepping away from the easy jokes and spotlighting work that's truly helping people." Meanwhile, Representative Jasmine Crockett found her public image evolving. She was no longer seen primarily as a partisan lawmaker, but as a national advocate for educational opportunity. While she continued to stand firm on her political principles, she used her newfound visibility to build bridges between unlikely allies. Across party lines, she united educators, local leaders, and policymakers around one shared goal: expanding opportunity for every young American. A year after her first Late Show appearance, Crockett and Colbert joined forces again, this time to co-host a national education forum. The event brought together teachers, parents, students, and policymakers from across the country. Unlike the usual policy gatherings dominated by political insiders, this forum centered the voices of those most directly affected by education policy: classroom teachers, students navigating learning systems, and families struggling to access opportunity. What Representative Crockett and I have tried to do, Colbert told the audience, is create a space where Americans can talk about education not as a political fight, but as a shared investment in our children and our future. The details of how we reach educational excellence will always spark debate, and that's healthy. But ensuring that every child has a fair chance to reach their potential should unite us all. Crockett agreed wholeheartedly. This work has never been about party advantage or ideological purity, she said. It's about realizing that our shared future depends on how well we prepare the next generation for challenges we can't even imagine yet. That's why education must be a national priority that transcends politics. The forum ended with an exciting announcement: the launch of the American Education Collaborative, a national initiative designed to connect innovative education programs across the country, share what's working, and build broader coalitions to support effective education policy at every level. Perhaps the most powerful legacy of Colbert's early decision to highlight Crockett's efforts was how it transformed public engagement with education nationwide. Across America, school board meetings began drawing larger, more diverse audiences. Parents, community leaders, and even local businesses started showing up. Eager to take part in shaping local education initiatives, local news stations followed suit, dedicating more airtime to in-depth discussions of education policy rather than only covering controversies or crises. Teachers noticed the difference too. For years, we struggled to get the community to pay attention to the real issues in education, said a high school teacher from Michigan. But after the Colbert-Crockett conversations, people started coming to me, parents, business owners, local officials, asking how they could help. It wasn't about politics anymore. It became about shared responsibility. A parent in Arizona echoed that sentiment. Watching those segments helped me realize that education policy isn't some distant government debate. It's about choices that shape my children's future. That understanding pushed me to get involved in ways I never had before. The story of how Stephen Colbert's genuine applause for Jasmine Crockett's education efforts evolved into a nationwide movement holds a powerful lesson about media's role in democracy. By using his platform to highlight serious work instead of simply chasing political drama, Colbert showed that media can elevate public dialogue, not just reflect its noise. As this inspiring story concludes, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate when public figures use their influence to spotlight real solutions to shared challenges. In a media world often focused on conflict over substance, moments like these remind us how powerful the media can be in strengthening democracy. America's education challenges are still vast, and opinions about how to address them will always differ. But the Colbert-Crockett collaboration proves something vital. Beneath all political divides, most Americans share a deep belief in creating opportunity for the next generation. By focusing on that shared purpose, they open the door for more constructive conversations about one of our nation's greatest responsibilities: preparing every child for a brighter future. In your own community, consider this. How can you be part of the solution? How can you support educational opportunity beyond political lines? The health of our democracy depends on our ability to unite around shared commitments, even when we differ on everything else.